Fredman couldn't look down on the old Mrs. Wilson, so it was impossible to manage the life and death of the Wilson family. Now he just wants to return to Eastcliff quickly, and then visit Eastcliff's famous doctor to see if he can heal. At this time, the old Mrs. Wilson still wanted to come over and beg for a few words, but Fredman did not give her a chance at all and waved his hand directly. "Okay, I will go up and pack things now, so please do it yourself." Old Mrs. Wilson's face turned pale, and she continued to plead, "Mr. Wilson, you can't leave us behind. You know the current situation of our Wilson family. Without your support, it will definitely collapse completely." With that, the old Mrs. Wilson winked at Wendy quickly. Wendy also immediately pleaded, "Fredman, Grandma said yes, and you said before that you want to invest $80 million in the Wilson family? Only $10 million has been given until now, which can't solve the Wilson family's problems." As she said, he was busy and said again, "Why don't you give us the remaining $70 million, so that we can continue to maintain it, and how we can go back to Orus Hill in the future? We may already be relieved." Others also looked expectantly. Fredman could leave, but the money had to be given, otherwise the Wilson family would be gone. Harold also licked his face to Fredman and said, "Fredman, my sister has followed you. Who does not know that Orus Hill is an upper-class person? You also know that she is still an unmarried girl. She is your woman. You can't watch her suffer when you are gone, right?" What the Wilson family didn't expect was that Fredman's expression became even uglier after hearing this. He cursed with a dark face. "Money, money, money. You 3 generations of grandparents. You know you want money every day. Even if I'm worthy of you, if I didn't take back your $10 million, you still dare to ask me for money? Dream." The old Mrs. Wilson still didn't give up. She squeezed out a few tears and said, "Fredman, you can do it well. Without your help, our Wilson family will be over." Others also pleaded, just like a beggar on the side of the road. Fredman was upset by the quarrel and directly slapped the old Mrs. Wilson with a slap. "One more nonsense. I will immediately ask the lawyer to seek compensation from you and ask you to refund the previous $10 million investment. You can figure it out." Old Mrs. Wilson covered her face, and she didn't dare to speak anymore. What if Fredman is really anxious and asks for the $10 million? As a result, she could only sigh in her heart, while watching Fredman finish packing his luggage and leave with the bodyguard. After Fredman left, the 5 members of the Wilson family fell into a sad atmosphere. Old Mrs. Wilson was upset, Harold and Wendy were perplexed, while Noah and his wife Horiah had their own ghosts. In fact, Noah still had some savings in his hands. He himself had a deposit of about $10 million. Later, the $5 million that Fredman gave to Wendy also went into the pockets of the couple. This $15 million was for buying a house. If he took the money out, he would be able to pay off most of the debts of the Wilson family, but how could he be willing? The current Wilson family is a bottomless pit, and money is filled in, and there will be no return. In that case, why invest money? Anyway, the company belongs to Mrs. Wilson, and she is also responsible for the debt relationship. If the court seizes her villa and funds in the future, she will not find her own. If she owns this $15 million, she is considered to have it. A foundation for the elderly. Thinking of this, Noah deliberately wanted to give the ball to Mrs. Wilson, so he took the lead and said anxiously, "Mom, our bank and suppliers still are to be paid a lot of debts. If they come to the door, what shall we pay back?" "Ah! I'm afraid that even this villa will be closed for auction by the bank. We have to prepare in advance." Old Mrs. Wilson also looked sad. How to do it? What can we do? The Wilson family now has no source of income, owes a lot of foreign debt, and the capital chain has long been broken. At this time, the only thing that can be done is to quickly find investment, otherwise it will soon fall apart. However, Fredman, who was most likely to help the Wilson family, also left. Who else can the Wilson family call now? Old Mrs. Wilson sighed and said, "Now that we can only go one step at a time." As she said, her eyes suddenly lit up, looked at Wendy, and blurted out, "Wendy, didn't Fredman give you to Verena?" Although the strength of the Way family is not as good as Fredman, the scale of assets is at least $2 billion, How about you go to him and find a way to let him invest tens of millions to help us tide over the difficulties? Noah also said excitedly, yes. Why forgot Barena from the Way family? Wendy, you have had some stories with him anyway, at this time he can't help but die? Wendy was too embarrassed to do her best for her own people at this time. When she thought that Barena could solve the problems of the Wilson family, she immediately took out her mobile phone and called Barena. But how did she know that Barena was sitting in a Land Cruiser at this time, heading north quickly? The driver who drove didn't know whether it was intentional or intentional. He played a folk song from mountains all the way from north, and Barena felt cold when he heard the song. Moreover, his mobile phone was taken away and turned off long ago, because Charlie clearly ordered that he could not use his mobile phone or surf the internet. Therefore, he didn't even know that Wendy was looking for him at this time and was anxious. Wendy was a little surprised after a few phone calls could not be made. She held her mobile phone and muttered, "What's the matter?" Barena's phone turned off. Their Way family just solved Fredman's troubles. It should be time to breathe.